A very good morning to you all. Trust the wait. Embrace the uncertainty. Enjoy the beauty of becoming. For nothing is certain. Anything is possible. Remembering that reflective quote? Today, we are starting with another amazing workshop of Touch the Peak, the annual job fair and entrepreneurship ventures workshop series organized by the Career Skills Development Society of University of Sri Jayawardenepura. So, today's topic would be more interesting to our undergraduates who are willing to go into the job market. As freshers, we need to have a lot of knowledge about the present work culture. I'll say the topic of today's session. It's the adaptation to the new normal work culture. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Sudat Manchalamarasena, the Director of the Career Guidance Unit and the Head of the Department of Decision Sciences in the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce. Mrs. Chaturangani Tennakon, Career Advisor of the Career Guidance Unit and the Senior Treasurer of the Career Skills Development Society. Also, we warmly welcome Ms.Dinusha Jayamanne, the General Manager of Human Resources in Brandix Apparel Solutions. And please welcome my heartfelt welcome to all audience who joined us today, as you are indeed the heart and soul of this workshop series. Now, let us witness a short video clip on Touch the Peak Annual Job Fair and Entrepreneur Ventures organized by the Career Skills Development Society. We would like to take this opportunity to present our prestigious sponsors for Touch the Peak Annual Job Fair and Entrepreneur Ventures 2022. Please remember, all the participants will receive an e-certificate. Stay tuned till the end of the session. As the next step of today's workshop, please let me introduce our resource person. This amazing personality is the General Manager of Human Resources in Brandix Apparel Solutions, Fast Fashion. Please welcome Ms.Dinusha Jayamanne. Very good morning, madam. We are glad to have you here. Madam, now it's time for you to enlighten these young undergraduates with your immensely valuable insights.
Thank you, Nehinsa. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, madam, we can hear you.
Okay, okay, that's good. Let me share my screen. Can you see the screen, Hinsa?
Yes, madam.
Okay, right. So good morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to this lovely gathering. I think early in the morning. Congratulations for, first of all, being here, right? So I think two things I'm very, very delighted for to be with you today. First is because I think I'm speaking to a very young audience, right? And I love to talk to young audiences because then I also feel young. Secondly, I think this audience is going to be part of the country's think tank into the future, right? So I'm very honored to be here with all of you today, right? So for those two reasons, I'm honored and delighted to be here. I think as Nihinsa started off by saying, you guys are the heart and soul of this session, and I'm sure of your faculty, of your undergraduate here, and I'm sure that you have lots of hopes and plans and aspirations to get into the corporate culture, right? And I'll do my best to take you through as to what this whole new normal is looking like today, and also how each of you can adapt to it to get into successful careers into the future. Right. So just before we do that, I have one request from all of you is that I don't want to conduct this session as a lecture because I know how boring lectures can be, right? And some of us fall asleep, we do other things, right? And we've all been there, done that, right? So I don't want this to be a lecture, but I would like this to be an interactive session, right? And when I say interactive, I'll be asking lots of questions and I'd like you to respond, please. And when you respond, please switch on your camera. Please tell who you are to the audience so that everyone gets to know you so that we can engage in conversation. So that's from my side. Secondly, as we go along, you can stop me, ask a question. If not, I can take questions at the very end. Right. So I'd like this to be a free flowing conversation so that we all feel comfortable and we learn from each other. Right. So that's a request from me. Okay. So let me kick off the session, right, on this topic of adaptation to the new normal work culture. So when I was asked to talk on this, I was actually thinking, okay, how do I start this, right? So I thought I'll just start with the topic per se, which says this buzzword of new normal. And I just want to check with you. Now, this is used quite a lot these days, right? In newspapers, all through the social media, in different platforms, right? People talk about this particular new normal. So can one of you tell me what this means? Can anyone tell me? Yes, Nihinsa, do you think we'll have some volunteers to answer this question? Okay, I have
normal
no.
is like normal. When we say it's normal, something that we come across day-to-day life.
Who is this? Sorry, I can't see you. Can I see you?
Yes, madam, I'm Nihinsa.
Ah, Nihinsa. Okay, okay.
Something we come across daily. So this time it's going to be something new. So it's like new normal.
Okay, so what you're saying is something that we come across daily and we now call it the new normal. It's the norm of today. Perhaps, can somebody else also tell me? Maybe Ashika, who I see on the screen. No, Ashika doesn't want to speak. Okay, Kumarasiri, can I call on Kumarasiri? Is that okay to ask people to speak up? Okay, I think Ms. Chatu is in the audience. I think I have known Chatu for a very, very long time, right? And I think Chatu, the students of Sri Jayawardhanapura have been more vocal than this before. Is that right? Is Chatu here? Okay, okay, so
Hello.
hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think the new things becoming normal or routine because of a sudden change or some due to an impact of sudden change.
Yes, a good point. Good point. So what you're saying is that it's something has gotten impacted due to a sudden change, right? So
Yes, and it becomes a routine thing.
Good point. Very good. Very good. So that's what I was also going to say. It is the definition of this whole new normal is an unparticular situation, right? That we as a society or we as an individual have not experienced before, right? So it often entails a very new routine, a different way of living and behaving, or a plan that is pretty much like set in stone. It has become sort of permanent and not changeable till we see a new thing happening. So that we call it the new normal again. So there can be multiple new normals as throughout our lives, throughout our careers. But I think during the last 2 years, we faced a lot of unprecedented change, right? And through this unprecedented change, we did experience things that none of us have experienced before, right? And now this has become the new normal. So what do you think could be some of these instances that happened to us last 2 years, which was very, very unprecedented? Can anyone tell me? What could be like a key impact that we had?
COVID-19 spread.
Yes, Ashika, yes, COVID-19, right? So I put that as the first key impact, and it impacted all of us. It impacted our country, it impacted the world. I think there's much said about this, so I will not really speak about this a lot. But with, I think, people falling sick, people having fatalities, people losing their loved ones, right? And it really impacted our society in a big way, right? Not only our society, but it also had an impact on our economy, right? If you look at our country, one of the key economic factors that we rely on is our tourism, right? And it impacted our tourism in a big way because people could not come and we stopped earning the currency that we were experiencing and getting before, right? So that was a big impact. Then we started seeing, because of multiple businesses getting hit, multiple small businesses getting shut, right? And because of the businesses not happening across shores, we saw that our rupee was getting depreciated against the dollar in a big way, right? And we all know the impact of this, but it has hit our country in a massive way as we speak, right? And we know that the daily income earners, as to what sort of impacts it has brought in. First, when the COVID pandemic hit and people could not get out and work, their daily income was impacted. And today, with depreciation of the rupee and with things going up in terms of costs and pricing, it has become very, very difficult for the daily income earner to survive, right? Also, I think we have been having this, right? So we've been having power outages, isn't it? We've been having a lot of candlelight dinners with our families these days. So that's been happening too. And plus, on the fuel crisis, you see, like now to get to my office, which is close to Valisara, it gets trafficky, because of the situation in the roads become really bad because of the long queues that we see, and this is a phenomena that we see across the country, right? So it's like currently this whole new normal is not just the COVID pandemic, but multiple things that have happened in the periphery that has impacted the economy, and people are in a lot of turmoil, right? So that's the bad side of the new normal, I would say, as I would define it, right? But it's not all that bleak. There are good things happening also. So I think the manner in which how the country reacted to COVID pandemic, I think Sri Lanka did get into a very, very structured way of circumventing the issue through a very strongly laid out vaccination program. I think compared to a lot of countries, Sri Lanka actually got into a very, very good regulated manner in how we could address this situation, and the discipline and the rigor in which it was executed was quite amazing to see. Right. And secondly, I think over the last couple of years, I don't know whether you have noticed, there was a lot of support for local businesses to grow. And maybe some of you have also become entrepreneurs. We see that a lot of young people getting into different types of ventures, some into technology, some into digital, some into actually producing some new products, right? And also selling and marketing it digitally in a very innovative way. So small businesses started emerging, and people started doing jobs which are in addition to what they're doing, and they're enjoying. Actually, I saw even in our offices, people pursuing a lot of passions. And you could see that when people started pursuing these passions, people in the community also started buying local, supporting local, and there's a big boom that is happening in this space for local small entrepreneurs, which is a good thing. And we saw recently that in the country, big corporate giants, right, or rather the best minds in Sri Lanka have also gotten together to support the government, to really collaborate and support the government to see how we can get out of this economic crisis. So it's good to see that the private sector and some of the entrepreneurs of Sri Lanka itself are coming forward to support the country, right? So those are good things. Related to COVID, I think compared to a lot of countries that we hear, and in Sri Lanka, I think our people's discipline in terms of following COVID protocols, it's wearing the masks, it's actual sanitization, has been actually quite disciplined, which is again a pleasant thing to see, where sometimes you see in developed countries, this is actually not the case. So despite some of the regulations being there, in some of the developed countries, you don't see people necessarily following it. So I think Sri Lanka embraced it really well, and corporates in Sri Lanka embraced it very well. And through that, I suppose, people started believing in the need for adherence to protocol, and hence we started seeing a much more safer guidelines and a set of safer behavior that our people were following, right? And also, we are now thinking, how can we reopen, right, the country for tourists using different mechanisms, using influencers, using actual things that we can offer as a country to the others, right? And you do see now tourists coming and flocking in the country more than before, which is again a good sign. And what happened over the last couple of years, we who have never gotten used to online shopping got into digital spaces, we got into digital stores, we got into a better level of technology or utilization of technology, which got us technologically savvy. Even our parents who would have never used a digital platform to order something, you saw them ordering, right? And that's a good thing. It is a nation actually taking a leap in terms of technology and getting more savvy and used to it, right? So these are a few things I thought I'll share with you. So the future is not too bleak, I hope, right? Because there are people who are thinking about the country. There are people like you who can support the country and actually make a contribution to it. And we can all together build this country to change the new normal into a positive, right? Considering though the certain situations that could remain, how do we really take it on, tackle it, and move it, as we say, we move the dial to a much more positive platform, right? So that's about the country. So I thought I'll also share with you certain things that impacted the corporates, right, or impacted organizations. Yeah, and one of the key things is that remote working because of the COVID pandemic became a norm. Right, so we saw before 2020, right, certain companies, very progressive companies in Sri Lanka, of course this was happening across the world, were practicing flexible work hours, people practicing working from home techniques, but it was in a very, very few corporates that these practices were happening. Across Sri Lanka, it was not necessarily considered that remote working is a possibility. However, what did COVID do to the corporate sector? COVID forced corporates to look at different types of working, right? So we had to work, I think, not just the private sector, but even the public sector started working from home. Right? And what does this mean? Like working from home started bringing in, again, as I said before, new technological advancements, right, to the workplace, to the individuals and the users who are actually utilizing some of these platforms and technology. And there was a better appreciation of the knowledge and skills that were required to navigate through this phase started emerging. Right? And that was a good thing. Secondly, you would have seen that some of the offices that were there before, huge buildings, which were, I think, utilized fully, all the building floors were utilized, are no longer utilized because some businesses closed down. Some businesses started completely working from home. So the necessity of an office which has to operate from a Monday to Friday was not necessarily now required, right? So what did people start doing? People started using co-working spaces also. And you see that that is a new business venture that is emerging in Sri Lanka. Like if you go to Park Street, you will see that big building, the Park Street white building, which offers a lot of co-working spaces for people to go, pay for a desk, right? And you can just work the entire day. Right, you have hotels offering it. You have other smaller places, like like places like Hatch, places that are even coming together for incubation of ideas. That sort of things are now becoming also part of the new normal. So some officers do work 8 to 5 or whatever that their time is across the week. Some officers have started using hybrid options. Some certain days you shut the office, you work from home, the rest of it you come. Certain officers use flexible work hours. Certain officers don't come to office at all, they're at home. And certain officers started using these co-working spaces. So new habits and new ventures started emerging. right? And this is like what we are on today is a Zoom call. What I'm sharing with you here in this picture is a Teams call. So what happened? I think connectivity also got enhanced, right? So we started using Teams, Zoom, all sorts of other platforms much more than before. And connectivity across countries became easier. Right? Connectivity across locations became easier. Like if you take Brandix, for instance, we have multiple locations across the country. We have locations overseas in multiple countries. So now connecting with people previously where you would perhaps travel, you would perhaps get into teleconferencing, or you would get into video conferencing, which was more of a hassle. Now you have easier techniques, easier tools to follow, and a quick connectivity across organizations. So this has started becoming a new normal as well, right? And with this, people had to learn new skills. So the easiest thing was, okay, for certain people who are completely not tech savvy, now they had to learn to use simple things like Teams, right? And it took a while. Right? It was not easy for certain people. New skills in terms of juggling work from home also started emerging, because although you think that working from home is easy, it actually wasn't, right? Because we have all experienced it. And let's say if you take me, I'm a mother, I have a 14-year-old kid. So my 14-year-old kid would be in his Zoom class, right? And I would be, say, in another place in the house working on my computer on another call. The responsibility as a mother to check on your kid, whether that kid is actually pursuing his school, right, or doing something else, bugs you. And secondly, on the other, household matters also come into play, right? So it's not necessarily a completely easy segmentation of your home and your office. It sort of gets all integrated, and if you don't really think through as to how you can segregate it and really focus on where focus is required, it becomes hard. So we had to teach our people new skill sets on how to optimize working from home. And sometimes certain companies or bosses, managers started misusing this working from home concept also, because, okay, people at home, they can't get out of home. So let's start fixing our meetings from 6 o'clock in the morning. And let's go until 9 o'clock in the night, right? And people started working too long and too frequently, and it sort of started setting a new level of fatigue for people. Because when you're in an office, right, you have, say you're at a meeting, you finish the meeting, you have a set of humans to speak to smile, talk to, you have a water cooler conversation, you chit chat with somebody in the corridor, and it sort of supports the mental well-being unknowingly. However, when we started working from home, the meetings would be one after another, right? Or whatever that you do would be one after another, and there wouldn't be any breaks in between. So the ability to maintain a certain level of proper mental well-being became difficult for certain people, right? So those were new skills that we were trying to bring in for people. And you would have noticed that some of your maybe younger siblings may have struggled with online schooling, because even for kids, it's difficult to stare at a computer from morning till evening, and it impacted certain kids, the level of education and the engagement. So it impacted all sorts of human beings. So that is why organizations started looking at flexing things and looking at hybrid ways of working, right? So there were new skills that were emerging. And into the future also, as we were talking of rebuilding our country, as we were talking of adaptation into progressing in our careers, these new skills will be very, very important and paramount for us to be able to learn, which I will talk about in a little bit. Yeah. Secondly, new mindsets also are required. The good thing is there are new mindsets that did come in, but are those mindsets really going to be permanent? The answer is no. So mindset, skills, everything have to be evolving, and they need to keep changing to the times, right? So for instance, I'll tell you something, another negative of working from home. In offices, the engagement across people became lesser, right? And interdepartmental collaboration also was impacted negatively. So people started working in silos. And during the last 2 years, we had people joining organizations where they have not seen their bosses physically, right? So it became a very different working environment. And sometimes for human connection, it may not fully be healthy. So hence, those hybrid options come into play. So the mindset that is required to operate in a hybrid working platform will need to continuously evolve, as I said before. Right, and new habits, right? So as things change in the country, right? So as things change in the society, as things change in the world, it's important for us to get into new positive habits, not all sorts of habits, but positive habits. And how do you practice those habits and bring them to life to support your careers are going to be very, very important. Any questions up to now? Or shall I proceed? Okay, let me proceed then. Right. So here, in terms of reskilling, right? So the World Economic Forum had a forum back in 2020, where they did a full study in terms of what are the skills that are required for future. So interestingly, COVID or no COVID, it was found that at least 50% of the employees working in corporates will need to reskill by 2025, right? So imagine, right? That means half of your population will now need to acquire new skills by 2025, right? And that is going to keep happening and keep elevating or enhancing as this new normal comes into play, and the new normal also changes, right? So some insights I wanted to share with you. So as I said, 50% of employees will need to reskill. And the top list of skills that are coming through are the skills around critical thinking and problem solving. So what the Economic Forum believes that it will grow in prominence over the next 5 years. Imagine, right? Things that we thought would come into play are not necessarily the skills of the future, but it is your ability to think of something critically and resolve problems. So think about it, right? So how good are we on these things? Because these are the skills for the future. And new skills started also coming into the list, such as self-management skills, right? So previously we had skills which were pertaining to organizations. How can you impact organizations through those skill sets? However, now in the new normal, the new skills that we are talking of are also things that we will use to self-regulate ourselves. Example, things like active learning. How good are we to learn something new? How proactive are we in learning something new? Right, then how good are we in terms of our resilience, right? You know what resilience is, right? The ability to sustain through let's say a difficult period, the ability to really sail through that period and still stay strong. And with a new normal emerging, resilient skills are absolutely necessary to stay strong. stress tolerance and flexibility. I think we spoke as to how this sort of new normal can impact people's mental well-being, right? So when you your mental well-being gets impacted, it also generates stress in the system as individuals, as teams, as also organizations. Stress can just set in, right? So across all these different parameters, that is across the teams, across individuals, the ability to manage stress in a positive way has to be built, and that's an emerging skill that you will see happening. So the time period for this, what the survey is saying is that 40% of workers will require reskilling of at least 6 months. So it's not like a skill that you can learn overnight, right? It is a skill that you will need to really put in effort, put in that time, and put in that commitment to take a longer period to study. Right? So I wanted to also share with you what are these different skill sets, the top skill sets that we are seeing. Right? So the first skill is that of analytical thinking. Right? So the ability to analyze, right? And it is not just data crunching, right? So how can you really make use of your data and make meaning out of it is important, right? And through that, how can you really put in your analytical thinking, and through that, how can you innovate, right? That's going to be a critical skill for the future. And the second thing, see, it's a self-management skill. So you will see on the left-hand side, the type of skills. So the light blue are the type of problem-solving skills. The green ones are self-management. There is some working with people and the technology, right? So you will see that the first top skill is a problem-solving skill. And the second skill is a self-management skill. So gone are the days that your bosses will tell you, hey, you know, I'll just pick a name, Ashika, you have to learn X, Y, and Z, right? And this is what you will require. So learn this, come back. It is not going to happen, right? We say in companies that your individual development is your baby. Right? Your career is your baby, right? And you have to embrace it, you have to own it, and you have to act on it and apply new skills to get there, right? So let me explain this active learning a little bit, right? So let's say you have an ambition to be say a manager, right? A manager of marketing, right? And for you to be a manager of marketing, there would be certain, let's say you are an executive today, right? And the executive of today may have certain strengths, and we say that how can you be self-aware of those strengths, and how can you really leverage those skills to get to that level that you want to get to, right? And how can you think very critically, right, for yourself? What are those technical or functional skills, and what are those leadership skills that you will need to acquire and put focus on to get to that next step? Now it's like those days, we used to list down about 10 to 15 things that we have to develop, right? We will say English training, we have to get better in our Excel, we have to be able to influence better, we have to be able to be better in our presentations, we have to analyze better. All of those things come, and then when you see people's development plans, they are built of about 10-15 things, and you have to achieve all of that in a year, right? Now that is not going to be practical, right? So you have to pick for yourself, even today as an undergraduate, what are those strengths that I have, right? And what are those strengths that I am going to leverage so that I can build a competitive edge for myself. Yeah. And secondly, what could be things that I'm not so good at, which will be critical for my job success into the future. And hence, let me pick maybe 2 things that I can focus on and bring a massive impact into my career, right? Because I always believe in something called less is more, right? Less is more means you pick few things less, which can bring in more impact. It's like you put in better focus so that you can enhance your results on the long run, right? So if you take this second competency or the second skill, which is on active learning and learning strategies, is something that as an undergraduate, you really have to think about, right? You really have to think and be self-aware of those things that I told you. What are my strengths? What are those couple of things that I will focus on? And how do I put in active learning and a strategy to learn those skills in multiple ways? Now at Brandix, we say people can learn it in 3 ways, right? We say our learning philosophy is called 70-20-10. So the 70 is 70% of the time you can learn on the job. Yeah. 20% of the time you can learn from others. That is through coaching, looking at role models, looking at, say, just pure observation, right? And 10% are the structured training or programs or different academics that you enroll yourself into. So across the 70-20-10, and I'll present it back to you for you to think about how can you get into this active learning mode by putting in a learning strategy for yourself, because the world is also saying that by 2025, which is not too far away, you will require this as the second top skill. Okay, so the third top skill is on complex problem solving, right? Again, you will see it's a blue circle. It is a problem solving skill, right? Now, what is complex problem solving? Today, problems are not limited to a particular area. It is not limited to one individual, because in organizations, you will realize when you start working, you will have to work in different matrices, right? So you will not be working for a particular boss. You may have a boss, right? You may have an administratively reporting direct boss, but still you will have multiple other stakeholders who will be getting involved for different decision making that you will have to be part of. So when you start having a problem in that matrix, you will have to think how to navigate through all these different stakeholders who might not even be in one country. And they might be in different geographies, right? They might be across the world. They could have different levels of knowledge. They could be evolved in different ways, and human beings are complex anyways, right? So how can you really tap on these different individuals, tap on the facts of the problem, and look at through the complexity, how will you minimize the complexity, make things much more simpler so that you can get to the core of the issue and start solving the problem. Yeah. So the next one also, if you see the fourth capability or the skill is again a problem solving capability. Now here, this time it's on critical thinking and analysis. So how can you think in a sequence, right? How can you think logically? How can you break it up? And how can you critically get to that point which you require solving through a proper analysis rather than using only a particular method, right? Fifth competency is a different one to critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is sequential, logical. You think in, put in your analysis and you solve. Look at this competency, the fifth one. It is around creativity, originality, and initiative, right? It's completely the other side of the spectrum. right? So how can you bring in your imagination? How can you bring in your innovation, your own thinking, your originality, and your own initiative, that is your assertion or your assertiveness into the problem, so that you use your intuition, you use other skills or the other side of the brain to also resolve problems. So I think there was some time ago that people used to think that only statisticians or mathematicians can resolve problems in the best possible way. But it doesn't look like it, right? So it depends on individuals' abilities, skills, etc., which you can, we call it, you bring your skills to the table, right? What you can do, you bring to the table so that teams can get together and get to proper problem solving. Yeah. And this one, the brown circle, is a working with people skill. Now that is on leadership and social influence. I think the fact that you guys are organizing this career fair, the fact that you're here today, right, is showing your leadership and ability to influence a certain social circle. Right? So now how can you propel that, right? How can you become much more better at it so that you have now exercised influence over a certain student group, and perhaps your academic lecturers, your professors, people like that, you have now displayed that leadership. But as you step into the corporate world, how can you now build a brand for yourself through your leadership, and how can you start influencing different types of people? Because I think just like in uni, you find different types of people walking into organizations, right? And some people may have studied overseas, some people may have studied in local universities, some people may not have studied at all, right? So you will get different types of individuals in teams. Now, we can't put people down just because, say, they don't have the same academic qualification as you. Perhaps they have a certain expertise or a certain skill set which is even better than you. So how can you tap into these stakeholder groups, as I said before, and exercise your influence in a manner that you actually use that influence and cast a leadership shadow for yourself, right? So the next two competencies are on technology, right? How do you use it? How do you design it and program it are also skills into the future, because what organizations are trying to do is digitize as much as possible. Now, in our factories, we are trying to set in technology platforms to be able to see, you know, that our kind of industries, that of a apparel manufacturer. So how does the person who is operating the machine, what is the speed in which that person operates it? How much of production pieces is the person generating? And what is the efficiency and the output of the individual as well as the total manufacturing line? You know, things like that. So various businesses, depending, it could be hospitality, it could be manufacturing, it could be IT, all these industries are starting to use technology. So if you are not savvy on the technology front, you might be left behind, and that goes for all of us, right? So how can we constantly stay ahead of the game in terms of new skills around technology that comes in? Yeah. Now the penultimate one, which is the one before the last, is a self-management skill, which is on resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. Now, these are some of the hardest to acquire, to be very honest, right? So, because when you start working, it's not like a protected environment that you have in your homes, right? It is not, I think, okay, let me just step back a couple of steps back. So when you're a student, right, when you're a school student, At school, you are with your parents, you are with your siblings, you are perhaps in a school environment that you're very used to, right? And I'm sure that you felt the difference when you stepped into uni, right? Uni would have given you a very, very different environment, atmosphere, and a set of different types of stressors that came your way to be able to adapt and flex. Now, as you step into the corporate world, it is going to be another set of new things that will come your way, right? So hence, these skills, if managed well, will definitely help you. But I don't want to scare you about the corporate culture. It's not as scary as I just explained. It is not. But still, it will offer you a different dimension of things, right? And if you can quickly step into that, right, with flexibility, with a mindset that you will be really resilient, that would help to reduce your learning curve or reduce the time of the learning curve that you will have. And the final skill is again another problem solving skill on reasoning and ideation. Now, the reason why I spent time to take you through these skill sets, which I hope was not too boring, is for you to get a view as to the composition of these new skills that the world is seeing into the future. And 2025 is just perhaps 3 years away, right? And not that this set of skills are going to remain constant, right? This will also change, right? So it's important for you to understand what are those skills that I will need to know of, right? And how do I keep abreast of it so that I don't become a dinosaur? Right? So the dinosaur mentality is something that you have to always keep in mind, how to not become that, right? And be redundant. Yeah, so let me move. Any questions so far? Okay, so let me also talk a bit about certain behaviors, right? So something that we see is that with the hybrid work model, right, that comes in, like I spoke to you earlier about the requirement in terms of different companies, right? So these things will start emerging. Right, so this is something that you will start seeing. Let me see if I can just get rid of this. Sorry. Okay, so that's a behavioral adaptation to organizations. Secondly, another, remember what I told you, that for the country, now certain, the best minds in Sri Lanka are coming together to collaborate. Similarly, in the corporates also, when you're in a working environment, the necessary skills or behavioral adaptations will come through collaboration. Because gone are the days that we say that hero mentality that we have, okay, X is the best person. Right? We do say recognize if X is really the best person, but if X can't work in a team, he or she will not survive, right? Because into the future, what we are looking for is high performance teams, not just into the future, as of today also, right? So we don't need individual stars. And research has found through, I think, the Center of Enterprise, the Central Enterprise Board in Singapore, and also CCL has found through research that what really works for organizations is high performance teams. And you must be seeing that in, you would have seen this in IT companies or heard about it or read about it, is that the teams that you operate are also not very, very long-term teams. Now, there is this concept called agility that comes in, right? And with the concept of agility, you may look at short-term teams coming together to achieve something to achieve a certain outcome. So it could be a certain project team, it could be a cross-functional team that comes together, and hence the collaboration thread across the team members is essential or is crucial for the team success, right? So with this, another method to evaluate performance management is being introduced, and at Brandix also we are introducing this called continuous performance management process, which is a continuous. So it's as part of the literal meaning of it, it is not limited to twice a year performance review. Right? Because that is a bit of a old school thing where, okay, people sit with your bosses and then you start reviewing your performance. Sometimes you've forgotten what you did also because you are doing it in 6 months and bosses have not given you that feedback. Now, some good bosses do, even in the absence of a process like this, but some bosses don't, right? So, and then you're told at the end of the year, okay, you're either not good or this is something you did 7 months ago, which you shouldn't have done, but we are not giving the opportunity for individuals to correct themselves. But through a continuous performance management process, you are doing 2 things. One is you are giving people on the spot feedback, right? On we call it Sbi Feedback at Brandix, which is we use it. So the Sbi stands for situation, behavior, and the impact, right? On the 18th of March, there was a set of people in my lecture room, right? And say X was there and X started shouting at Y, right? So that is the behavior, right? And that made Y very uncomfortable. So that is the impact on the person, and it made Y very embarrassed, right? So that we use it as a tool to really tell the situation, what was the behavior, what is the impact on the person, so that you by doing this, you can give some objective feedback instead of saying, you know, X, Mr. X, you're a screwed up person, right? Sorry for using that language, but that, you know, mistakes, you're a bad person, right? So you instead you give more objective feedback. So by using tools like that in a more frequent manner, organizations are getting into a level of agility that I spoke before. So it's important for you also in your minds to be able to think of this concept called agility and really question and ask yourself, how agile are you, right? How much are you willing to change, right? Are you a hero mentality person? I hope not, and I'm sure you are not, right? But can I work in a team effectively, right? Can I collaborate? Or is it always about me, right? Is it always that I am the superstar, you know? I am the one who has to continuously get praise or recognition. Is that the kind of mentality I'm in? Or really point out and say, hey, I had ABC in my team, and A did this, B did this, C did this, and then we got together and achieved this fantastic outcome, right? And then work also becomes really enjoyable and fulfilling. Yeah, and another key concept that is emerging in organizations is this concept called diversity and inclusion. Now, this is not a very new concept. Certain organizations had embraced it some time ago. This is to talk about, but now it's being embraced a lot more by organizations, not as a nice to have, but actually as a strategic imperative, right? And I'll tell you what it is. So it has 2 components. Again, looking at the literal meaning, the first word is on diversity. Right, so diversity means, what is it? Diversity means in Sinhalese we call it vividatva, right? So we bring in different, or that we celebrate differences, right? It could be differences in terms of gender. It could be differences in terms of in terms of ethnicity, it could be differences in terms of religion, it could be differences in terms of educational background, right? It could be differences in terms of you have been brought up culturally, so all these differences. And research has found that the more diverse your teams are, and the more diverse the organizations that you have, you actually have better engagement, better talent management, better problem solving, and better financial results, right? So this got organizations really thinking and started thinking of how can we bring this diversity to our teams, right? And how can we also look at the concept of inclusion? So that is people with differences, how can you still make them feel included? Right? I'll give you some examples. Okay. So take, for instance, I'll take a taboo topic, right? So in Sri Lanka, we are still not too comfortable in corporates, right? Too comfortable to talk of the gender of, who you call the people of the same sex, right? So say transgender, right? So you have male, female, and you have transgender, right? But when you have a transgender person in your team, right, the stigma that comes attached to it is still prevalent in some of our culture, some parts of our culture. So organizations are even thinking of implementing things like the rainbow flag, things like that, to show that irrespective of your gender, if you bring in the right level of values, you bring in the right level of skill sets, right, which will be useful for the teams and the organizations, you are very much part of the system, right? And we will not discriminate, right? And there are people sometimes with disabilities. Let's say my arm, my left arm does not work, right? And it's, say I'm incapacitated. Does that mean that I cannot get a job? Maybe my brain works way better than somebody else whose both arms are working. And the project that I'm part of requires me to have that critical thinking, that cognitive ability, all of that. So should I be discriminated because of my disability? No, right? So companies are thinking of different things to create this diversity. So for instance, something that a lot of Sri Lankan organizations, including Brandix, are doing is how can you make a gender equitable workforce, right? And I'm using the word equitable instead of equality per se, because equitable brings in a much lovelier platform to work across different genders. And to support, let's say if you take women for instance, so how can you support women to grow in their careers, right? How can you how can you look at bringing in diversity across generations, right? Because the generations, now Generation Zs like you guys also are coming into the workforce, but you still have your baby boomer in your team, right? So how can you equip these different types of generational types to coexist in teams and work together and still get into a much better outcome? And things around inclusion, where you create more ethical practices. Companies are bringing in abuse and harassment policies, right? So that there is no discrimination or bullying or harassment and things like that. And these are, as I said before, not just things that are good to have. These are things that are new behavioral adaptations that organizations are taking as a strategic tool, which would benefit their businesses on the long run. Yeah. And also the mindset beyond the function, right? So sometimes, let's say if I'm in HR, do I think of HR only? Right? The guy in marketing doesn't think of the operations person, only thinks of marketing, right? But instead, at leadership levels, how can you create this business mindset, or what we call the enterprise mindset, so that you break the silos and you work across the value chain to be able to really think business, right? If you think of it as your own business, you would succeed, right? Irrespective of any a type of establishment or organization that you're part of. Okay, so let's talk of now you guys, right? So how can you become adaptable? A few tips I wanted to give you apart from what we discussed. So the first is, it's important to get out of your comfort zone, right? Because I think we are quite comfortable now. Okay, we've been at uni for a few years, right? And we know our friends. So it's easier to hang out with our friends that we know and stay in that comfort zone. So no problems. But still, if you don't really step out, right? If you don't really take that awkward step to step out, it may not really bring you career progress. That's why I'm pushing you even to ask questions at this forum. It is also to take you out of that comfort zone. Yeah. So, and anyway, as a country, as a culture, I think also we are not very, vociferous, I would say, compared to certain other cultures. Let's say joining country, the audiences are quite different, right? So how can we still get some of those skill sets in so that we don't become complacent? And the second skill, which is a skill that I love, is to be inquisitive, right? It's something you can practice. Like when we were children, we were very curious, right? So it's called, and then when we were curious, we used to ask a lot of questions. We used to explore things, right? And we used to get into very, very, it was like, your imagination would be improved, your innovation would get improved through being inquisitive. So the second and the third circle, I'd like you to think about and think, how can you even as an adult maintain that childlike curiosity? Because it will help you even in a corporate, right? If you're constantly open and you're curious to learn. Right? It's a very, very important trait. And as I said before, please be open to change, because all of us have certain constraints in our minds. And sometimes these constraints don't allow us to really expand our horizons and really, set our wings free to really fly. So being open to change is important, and be really humble in the fact that you can learn from others, right? Irrespective of what position they hold, whether it's your janitor, whether it's somebody with a very, very low educational background, they still offer something different and something unique that we don't know. So how can we tap that from them? And selfishly also, so that you're learning different skill sets from different people, right? And there is never a right time, right? So, and don't wait for it. Okay, I'll do this in a week, I'll do this in a month or in a year. It doesn't happen like that. It's the time is right now. Right? So remember that. And I wanted to, at the end, leave you with with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown, where she says that wholehearted living is not like trying to reach a destination. Yeah, it's like walking towards a star in the sky. We never really arrive, but we certainly know that we're heading in the right direction. So I'd like to leave that thought with you to remember that we are all on a journey. We are traversing this journey. And as we are walking, let it be fun, let it be enjoyable, but know that you are in the right direction, right? So with that, I will stop speaking, and I'd like to hear any questions that you may have. I'm happy to answer. Okay, thank you. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, madam, for sharing your valuable insights and experience with our undergraduates. So I'm pretty sure that our undergraduates have gotten a good knowledge of how to adapt to the new work culture. Dear participants, please submit the Google form that our organizing committee has shared in the chat box to register for the certificate participation. Next, we are going to start our Q&A session. I'd like to remind the participants to kindly clarify queries and doubts if there are any. You can use the chat box or you can directly turn on your microphone and ask.
Yes, who has any questions?
Well then, we would like to hear the feedback on today's session. You can express your thoughts about today's session either on the chat box, you can directly speak to the audience.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, madam, for this valuable session. Actually, it is very important session about adaptation to new normal work culture. I would like to thank again, madam.
Ms.Dinusha, good morning, Chatu here. So actually then I take this opportunity to give our thanks for you, your valuable time and on behalf of our university students. So then actually I think this is a very valuable topic and very valuable topic for our fresh graduates who wish to enter the job market recently. So then thank you very much, Ms. Dinusha. So then you actually then we can't forget touch the this event because when touch the peak begins, you gave a very good insight and we yes actually we are very happy to recall that how you dedicate on behalf of the touch the peak. I think you worked with us more than 15 years. So thank you very much, Ms. Dinusha again. And thank you very much, Brandix also giving a faculty partnership and to carry this workshop. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Chatu, and thank you for the opportunity. It was our pleasure.
I'm quite sure that the skills, guidance aimed at adapting to the new general work culture will be extremely important in your future careers. So, I deem it a great honor to propose a vote of thanks for this valuable session. First and foremost, I would like to thank our resource person today. Thank you very much, dear madam, for spending your immensely valuable time to be here with us today and sharing your broader knowledge with us. Your in-depth knowledge, invaluable expertise, and experience all together are indeed a perception to us. I express my deep sense of gratitude to Professor Siddharth Manchalamarasena, the Director of the Career Guidance Unit, the Head of the Department of Decision Sciences in the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce for the guidance, encouragement, and support that you have given, making our effort a success. My heartfelt thanks goes to Mrs. Chaturangani Tennakon, Career Advisor of the Career Guidance Unit and Senior Treasurer of the Career Skills Development Society for extending your helping hand at all moments of need. I thank all the members of the organizing committee for all the support in making this event a success. And last but not least, I would like to thank our amazing audience for joining us to make this session a success. Thank you very much for your cooperation. With that, we shall mark the end of this session. Don't forget to join us again at 3:30 a.m. with the fourth workshop of Touch the Peak workshop series on how to face an online interview. Have a good day and stay safe.